Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. In today's episode we are going to be doing another unit review, this time taking a look at the Steel Officers of the Guard, the Tank Commanders. In case you've not seen one of these unit reviews before, what I like to do is start off with an overview, taking you through the different weapons, war gear, stats and abilities of the unit. We then move on to a deep dive, taking a look at the tactical and strategic ways you can use this unit on the tabletop. And finally, we wrap it up with a score out of 10, giving it a thumbs up, a thumbs down and some general final thoughts. So without further ado, let's crush the enemies of the Imperium beneath our steel treads and dive right into today's episode. So let's start off with that unit overview. The first thing to be aware of is that the Tank Commander is basically an officer in a Leman Russ. But unlike other Leman Russes who are found in the heavy support section, these guys are found as HQ units. They are single models. You cannot squadron them, so you can't take 3 tank commanders in a single heavy support slot like you can with Leman Russes. And also, they have the officer key word, which means they are able to issue orders to other tanks. By default, the tank commander knows mechanized orders, and he can issue these mechanized orders to any other vehicles in your Imperial Guard army. Now, being in a Leman Russ, the tank commander has one of the most impressive stat lines of any of the officers in the Imperial Guard. He is essentially riding around in a big old battle tank. So he has a movement value of 10, weapon skill 6+, ballistic skill 4+, strength 7, toughness 8, 13 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 7, and a mighty 2+ save. As standard, a tank commander is equipped with a las cannon and a Leman Russ battle cannon, but you can replace the Leman Russ battle cannon with either a Demolisher battle cannon, an Eradicator Nova cannon, an Executioner plasma cannon, an Exterminator autocannon, a Punisher Gatling cannon, or a Vanquisher battle cannon. You can also replace the Hull las cannon with a Hull heavy bolter or heavy flamer. In addition, you can add extra weapons onto your tank commander, the most common ones being the extra sponsor weapons that you slap on the side of the tank. These can either be a pair of heavy bolters, a pair of heavy flamers, a pair of multi-melters, or a pair of Militarum plasma cannons. Like many vehicles in the Guard, you also are able to add extra upgrades onto the tank commander. Some of these are additional small weapons like a heavy stubber or storm bolter, but you can also add on a dozer blade, a hunter killer missile, or armored tracks. Now, I have gone into a lot of detail on the different weapons that you can take for the Guard battle tanks in my Leman Russ unit review, and I will link that video at the end of this one. However, I appreciate that not everyone will have seen the other Leman Russ unit review, so what I will do is briefly go over the weapon options available to the tank commander, but I do recommend that you check out that other video. Starting off with the Demolisher battle cannon. This is essentially a very short range but very powerful weapon, and it is favoured by a lot of commanders because of how good it was in previous editions. However, it does have a very random number of shots. Sometimes you'll get 6 shots, sometimes you'll get 1. So due to that unreliability, I often don't recommend it. You've then got the Eradicator Nova cannon. This is designed for digging light infantry out of cover. It has a very reliable number of shots, but its payload is quite weak. In fact, it's one of the weakest weapons that the tank commander can take, but it is, like I said, very reliable. You've then got the Executioner plasma cannon, the current favourite weapon for many Leman Russes in 9th edition. This is an incredibly flexible weapon. It's got good range, it's got a decent amount of shots, it's got good strength, it's got fantastic AP, it's got good damage. The only disadvantage it has is that if you roll a 1 to hit, then your tank does a wound to itself. So if you're not careful, you can end up destroying your own tank over the course of a game. The Exterminator autocannon is a long-range weapon with a fixed number of shots. It always fires out 6 autocannon shells. All of the other weapons that the Leman Russ can take typically fire like D6+3 or 3+D6 or D6 just straight up. Either way, they've got that element of randomness in, and it can be really annoying when you just need to get an average amount of shots and suddenly you roll that big fat 1 and your plan goes to shit. So having a tank that will always put out the same number of shots can be very, very viable, which is why I personally like having an exterminator or 2 in a lot of my Guard armies. Next up, we have the Leman Russ Battle Cannon, the jack of all trades, master of none, and the quintessential weapon that you see on many Leman Russes. I really like the Battle Cannon because it is very flexible. You can shoot it at any target and it will always do some damage. Its main advantage over other more powerful weapons like the Executioner or the Demolisher is its incredibly long range. It has double the range of an Executioner plasma cannon and triple the range of a Demolisher cannon. So no matter what happens, you're always going to be in range of your enemy. If you can see it, you can shoot it. Second to last, we have the Punisher Gatling Cannon. This weapon is very specialized and is purely dedicated for mowing down ranks of infantry. Its weapon is only 24-inch range, it's only strength 6, it's only AP -1, it's only 1 damage. On the surface, it actually has the weakest output of any of the tanks. But then you take into account that it fires a fixed 20 shots. That is more than double any other weapon out there for the Russ. And it makes you realize that this has a very important role. When you're facing a horde, accept no substitute over the Punisher Gatling Cannon. Last but not least, we have the Vanquisher Battle Cannon. Now, in the fluff, most tank commanders are actually armed with Vanquishers because they are specialized tank-on-tank killers, and only dedicated and decorated tank aces are allowed to use them. It fires a single shot, but oh boy, what a shot. It is the bigger strength, best AP, best damage, it even does mortal wounds on top, and it ignores invulnerable saves. The only disadvantage the Vanquisher Cannon has is it only fires 1 shot, so if you miss, it means that your tank is basically doing nothing for a whole turn of the game. But if you hit, you're pretty much guaranteed to wound, and if you wound, well, in many cases, you're guaranteed to one-shot the enemy unit. So that covers all of the weapons, war gear, and stats of the tank commander. But now let's get into the deep dive. What separates this from a normal Leman Russ, and why are they so essential for your guard army? Well, fundamentally, a tank commander is in a Leman Russ, and a Leman Russ is a very powerful shooting unit, and the guard is a shooting faction. So the more units that you can take that are going to increase your firepower and your damage output is great. But what separates the tank commander from the regular Leman Russ is that he's not just a damage dealer, he's also a massive force multiplier. You see, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, tank commanders can do mechanized orders, and mechanized orders unlock a whole suite of tactical options for your armored core. They are essential for getting the most out of your battle tanks. In case you're not familiar with how guard orders work, it's actually pretty simple. Certain units in your army are officers, and those officers can select nearby friendly units and give them temporary buffs. For example, your regular infantry officers can do regimental orders. These are focused on giving your infantry a little bit more damage output or maneuverability. Likewise, commissars can do perfectus orders, and tank commanders can do mechanized orders, which are all focused upon giving extra little benefits to your tanks. So let's take a look at these mechanized orders. The first one is pound them to dust. This is designed for you to get more reliable shots out of those random shot weapons that we were talking about before. For example, the battle cannon normally only fires D6 plus 3 shots, but if you use pound them into dust, there's a good chance that you'll be able to get maximum shots from that tank every time you shoot it. You've then got full throttle. This adds additional movement onto your tank and also allows it to advance and still shoot. Gunner's kill on sight is probably the most common one, and it's the most universally useful buff. It gives your tanks reroll 1s to hit. Really helpful if you're taking a lot of those Executioner plasma tanks. Blitz though is a little bit of a funny one. I've only ever seen it used effectively once. It basically makes your Leman Russ slightly more effective in close combat. Shock and Awe is situational but potentially game winning. It gives the unit objective secured, which means you can use a Russ to sneak an objective away from an enemy unit. You've then got Pinning Fire. I love Pinning Fire. It actually has come up more often than you think in many of my games. What it allows you to do is shoot an enemy unit And if you get 5 hits, that enemy unit reduces its move characteristic by 2 inches, massively slowing down your opponent's army. If you're facing off against an army like Terminators or some other slow-moving infantry, being able to slap a -2 to hit modifier on them really helps, and it's going to make that army slow down to a crawl, and it's going to give you that mobility advantage. Now, let me be clear. These mechanized orders are the #1 reason you should be taking tank commanders. If you don't plan on using the tank commander for his mechanized orders, you might as well just stick with basic Leman Russes. But I strongly advise you to include tank commanders in your force. No good, balanced hybrid guard army goes to war without at least 1 tank commander in it, supporting an additional 3 other Leman Russes. That really does form the cornerstone, the backbone of the firepower of pretty much every guard list out there. However, it's not just mechanized orders that tank commanders are bringing to the table. They also gain access to one of the best relics in the guard, which is Gatekeeper. Now, Gatekeeper is a relic battle cannon, which means you have to take a Leman tank commander with a battle cannon first, spend their command point on the Gatekeeper relic, and then put that relic on the tank commander with the cannon. Now, Gatekeeper is essentially a souped up battle cannon, and it is probably the best weapon you can put on a Leman Russ. It has all of the range advantage of a battle cannon. It has the best strength, it has the best AP, it's got the flat damage, and it also puts out an incredibly reliable number of shots. If you're ever taking a tank commander, there is almost no reason not to make it a Gatekeeper one. But in addition to a fantastic relic, tank commanders also benefit from tank aces just like any other Leman Russ. Now, tank aces are essentially paid upgrades that you add onto your tank, and it's to represent a veteran crew or particularly experienced commander. They are just points upgrades, so it's almost like slapping on some sponsors on the side. It's essentially the same thing. It doesn't cost you CP or anything like that. It's just a straight up points upgrade. Now, there are a number of tank aces available, and we'll briefly go over which ones pair well with the tank commander. Meticulous Calibrator is fantastic with Gatekeeper because it means each time you make a ranged attack, the enemy target does not receive the benefits of cover against that attack. That means your opponent can't use any light cover to boost his armor save, and he can't use any dense cover to try and give you a -1 to hit modifier. Mechanical Pack Rat is one that I don't recommend for normal Leman Russes, but one that I actually think is really good on tank commanders. You see, what this tank ace does is it means you can never be wounded on a 1 to 3. That means you can only ever be wounded on a 4+. That means if someone hits you with a volcano cannon or a really strong weapon, it could be strength 1000, it doesn't matter. A 1 to 3 always fails. If you're familiar with Space Marines, it's like transhuman physiology. Now, like I said, I don't normally bother with this one on a regular Leman Russ because they're pretty expendable. You'll probably have 3 or 4 of them in your list. If one of them dies, you've got plenty left over. But most guard armies only go into battle with 1 tank commander. And if that tank commander dies, you might lose your only source of mechanized orders. So making him very durable is not a bad shout at all. Veteran Commandeer is one of my personal favorites. It gives you access to an extra regimental doctrine. So you'd have born soldiers plus an extra trait. The way I like to run this is with a Vanquisher Cannon. And then I give that Vanquisher Cannon Leman Russ Veteran Commandeer trait, and I give it Elite Sharpshooters. This gives that tank an inbuilt reroll to hit. Now, if you remember, I said the Vanquisher Cannon's only disadvantage is that if you miss, you're fucked. But if you've got an inbuilt reroll, it really means that you've got a good chance of hitting every single turn with that very powerful weapon. Knight of Piety is kind of cool. It gives you a 5+ invulnerable save, and you also get a 5+ feel no pain against mortal wounds. However, I do find it to be a little bit redundant. It's one of the more expensive tank aces, and for just a little bit more points, you can get a Tech Beast Engines here. He's also going to be able to give you a 5+ vulnerable save, and he's going to be able to repair your tank against any wounds, whether they're mortal or otherwise. Master of Camouflage gives you light cover on your tank commander. Now, like Mechanical Pack Rat, I wouldn't bother with this on a regular Russ, but it's really cool to put it on a tank commander because it makes you potentially very durable. If you've got light cover and you've already got a 2+ save, that essentially puts you on a 1-up save. Now, of course, a 1 always fails, but it actually gives you protection against AP -1 weapons. But then if you combine that with Armored Tracks, which gives you another +1 to your save, against damage on weapons. It means unless someone hits you with something properly powerful, some anti-tank weapon, you're probably going to be on a 1-up, 2-up save all the time. Last up, we have Steel Commissar. This is a really, really cool tank ace, but I don't know how powerful or useful it is. Basically, it allows your tank commander to know mechanized orders, but he also knows Prefector's orders as well. Essentially, it's a Commissar commanding the tank. However, you can only do those Commissar orders to infantry or abhuman units. If you could do the Prefector's orders to other tanks, that would make this tank ace top tier. I'm talking S tier. Having the ability to be able to fall your tank back from combat and still be able to shoot would be incredibly good. But speaking of getting tied up in combat, we've seen a lot of the advantages and the good things about a tank commander, but let's take a look at some of the problems, because no unit is perfect. Like any Leman Russ, like any guard tank, they suck in melee. You are not going to be able to fight your way out of a wet paper bag. Even with things like blitz them and crush them, it's just not where your tanks want to be. So make sure that your Leman Russ tank commanders and other tanks are well screened by infantry. I know there's always a temptation to do a proper armored cavalry charge, but every time I've seen that done by myself or by other people, all that happens is your Leman Russes get tied up and then they can't shoot, and then they're not having a good time. On top of this, don't forget that even though your Leman Russ tank commander is a character, because he's got 13 wounds, you can't benefit from Lookout Sir, which means that if you expose your tank commander against some really powerful enemy shooting units, they'll just be able to pick him out, and that might mean that you lose your source of mechanized orders. So make sure that you're being careful with them, and make sure that you're not overly exposing them. And the last problem with the tank commander, and one that I see a lot of people get wrong, is that he actually struggles to get orders himself, because he can't order his own tank. I know it's silly. He is a tank commander. He should be able to poke his head down and speak to the rest of the crew and go, all right, lads, we need to go a bit faster, or, you know, we need to blow that enemy tank up. But no, he can't do it. Apparently, he's a bad manager and his crew won't listen to him. So he can only order other vehicles in your army. Now, there are a couple of ways of getting orders on your tank commander so they can benefit from those force multipliers. And you do that with either the lead by example warlord trait or by taking a Lord Solar. Now, these work and they're totally fine, but just be aware that the tank commander does not have the squadron keyword, which means if you order him, he can't splash those orders out to other nearby vehicles. So that covers the deep dive, but now let's get into that final score. I'm going to give the tank commander a 9 out of 10. It is a fantastic top tier unit, and it is essential in most guard armies. At its core, it is a Leman Russ. It comes with all of the advantages that that fantastic main battle tank has. But in addition to this, it's a vital force multiplier. Not only is it bringing more firepower, but it's making your other firepower even better. You will struggle to see a competitive guard list that doesn't include at least one of these steel commanders. But all of this is just like my opinion, man. So let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Do you like the tank commander, or do you prefer to get your mechanized orders from somewhere else? Or are you a fine, upstanding gentleman and a pure infantry commander? Let me know your thoughts down in that comment section. If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button like you will smash your steel treads into the enemy's face, and also subscribe to never miss an episode. If you have found today's video particularly fun or informative, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. One of the biggest advantages of becoming a channel member or Patreon is you gain access to the Mordy and Glory Discord server, an online community of over 1,000 active members. It's really exploded, and it's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got army lists, we've got tactics, we've got strategy, we've got hobbying, painting channels, and of course we've also got a pretty spicy meme channel as well. And I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you to all of the latest channel members. So thank you to Milo Moran, Stratostarix, Dave Evans, Tim Taylor, Simon Dolding, Matt Lewis, Steely Wolves, Leonidas King, James Lathan, Space Tonk, Daniel, and Babchib. Thank you guys for doing your part. I also want to shout out the latest Patreons as well. So a big thank you to Deathcore Commander, Peter Stella, Tyson Bowman, Craig Smith, Adam Canklin, and the Commissar 357. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a special, personal heartfelt thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ridemaster 134-1, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, and Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys for your incredibly generous support. It is a big part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time, and I'm eternally grateful for your generosity. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.